Welcome, friends. Today I want to tell you the tale of lost time. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Petya Zubov. He was a third-grade student at the school number 14. But alas, Petya was always behind, whether in writing, calculus, or even singing. Plenty of time, he would say at the end of the first term. I'll catch up in the second. But when the second term came, Petya pinned his hopes on the third, and so he lagged behind and fell further behind, always assuring himself, "I'll manage, there's still time." One morning, Petya arrived at school as usual, late. He dashed into the cloakroom, tossed his school bag onto a bench and shouted, "Tёtya Natasha, can you take my coat?" Tёtya Natasha's voice came from somewhere deep in the cloakroom. "Who's calling me?" "It's me, Petya Zubov," he replied. "Why does your voice sound so strange and hoarse today?" she asked. "That's what I'd like to know," Petya said. "It just happened all of a sudden." Tёtya Natasha emerged from behind the coat racks, took one look at Petya and let out a shriek. Petya was startled. "Tёtya Natasha, what's the matter?" he asked. "What do you mean, what's the matter? You say you're Petya Zubov, but you must be his grandfather instead." "Grandfather? Nonsense," Petya protested. "I'm Petya, a third-grade student." "Take a look in the mirror," Tёtya Natasha replied. Petya glanced into the mirror and nearly fainted. Staring back at him was not a young boy, but a tall, thin, pale old man. A thick beard had sprouted from his chin, and his face was crisscrossed with wrinkles. His grey beard trembled as he gasped, "Holy crap!" and bolted out of the school. As he dashed through the streets, a single thought repeated in his mind. "What if mother doesn't recognize me? Then I am truly lost." Finally, Petya arrived home and rang the doorbell 3 times in quick succession. His mother opened the door, looking out. She stared at him, but said nothing, and Petya, his beard jutting forward awkwardly, stood frozen, ready to cry. "Who are you looking for, Dedushka?" she asked gently, after a long pause. "Don't you recognize me?" Petya whispered hoarsely. "I'm afraid I don't," his mother replied, her voice filled with pity. Heartbroken, Petya turned and walked away, aimlessly wandering the streets. His thoughts spiraled as he tumbled forward. "What a lonely, miserable old man I've become. No family, no children, no friends. And worst of all, I haven't learned anything. Real old folks are respected, they're teachers, doctors, craftsmen. But me, I'm just a third grader. I wouldn't even qualify for a pension." The more Petya thought about his plight, the heavier his heart grew. His steps carried him beyond the town and into the forest. He walked deeper and deeper until the trees blocked out the last light of day. Exhausted, Petya wished for a place to rest, and as if in answer, a small white house appeared between the trees. Petya approached the house and peered inside. It was silent, with no one in sight. In the center of the room stood a table lit by a kerosene lamp, surrounded by 4 stools. A clock ticked on the wall, and in one corner lay a cozy pile of hay. With nowhere else to go, Petya burrowed into the hay, crying softly. He wiped his tears on his beard, then fell into a restless sleep. When Petya awoke, the room was bright, the kerosene lamp glowing steadily. Around the table sat 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. They hunched over a copper-bound abacus, muttering as they calculated. 2 years here, 5 years there. 7 years for you, Sergei Vladimirovich. Olga Kapitonovna, these are yours. Marfa Vasilievna, take these. And Pantelei Zakharovich, the rest are for you. Their voices were strained and heavy, their expressions grim. Petya watched, puzzled. Why were these children groaning like tired old people? Why were they addressing each other with such formal names? And why were they meeting in this eerie, isolated hut? The answers sent a chill down Petya's spine. These weren't ordinary children. They were sorcerers, evil sorcerers who had discovered a sinister secret. Anyone who wastes time without care grows old before they realize it. And these sorcerers preyed on such children. Petya listened in horror as the truth unfolded. The sorcerers had captured children who frittered away their time, just like Petya. They drained their youth and turned them into elderly shadows of themselves. Meanwhile, the sorcerers would absorb the stolen time, transforming into sprightly children. Now Petya understood why he had become an old man overnight. Worse still, he was powerless to change it. Or was he? At the head of the table, the chief sorcerer, Sergei Vladimirovich, set down the abacus and walked to the clock on the wall. He adjusted the hands, pulled the weights, and listened intently to the tick of the pendulum. After whispering to himself and recalculating on the abacus, he turned to the group. "Gentlemen," Sergei Vladimirovich announced, "it's not too late for these children. There's still a way to return their lost youth." The other sorcerers gasped. "How is that possible?" "I'll explain," said Sergei Vladimirovich. He tiptoed cautiously out of the house, glancing around to ensure the coast was clear. He bolted the door tightly behind him and poked at the hay with a stick. Petya Zubov froze like a mouse, trembling in the shadows. The dim glow of the kerosene lamp illuminated the room, and the sorcerer remained oblivious to Petya's presence. Drawing the other sorcerers close, he spoke in hushed tone, the weight of his words thick with foreboding. "Unfortunately, this is how it works in this world. A person can be saved from any misfortune. If the children we turned into old men find each other tomorrow, arrive here at precisely midnight, and turn the clock hand back 77 times, then the children will regain their youth, and we will perish." The sorceress fell silent, absorbing the gravity of his statement. After a moment, Olga Kapitonovna broke the silence, her voice laced with doubt. "But how will they know to do this?" Pantelei Zakharovich grumbled. "They'll never make it here by midnight. They'll be late, even if just by a minute," Marfa Vasilyevna muttered under her breath. "They can't do that. These lazybones won't be able to count to 77. They lose track immediately." "That's true," Sergei Vladimirovich replied, nodding in agreement. "But for now we must stay alert. If the children reach the clock and touch the hands, we will be powerless. Time is short. Let's get to work." With that, the wizards hurriedly hid the abacus inside the table, scurrying away like children, but groaning and sighing like weary old souls. Once the sounds of their footsteps faded into the forest, Petya Zubov emerged from his hiding place and, wasting no time, slipped between the trees and bushes, racing toward the city to find the other old school children. The city was still shrouded in slumber, with darkened windows and empty streets. Only the policemen stood watch at their posts. But as dawn broke, the first trams rang out, breaking the silence. Petya's heart leapt as he spotted an old woman shuffling slowly down the street, her large basket swaying at her side. "Excuse me, Grandma," Petya called out, running up to her. "Are you a schoolgirl?" The old woman raised an eyebrow, her expression stern. "What did you say?" Are you a third grader?" Petya whispered, his voice trembling with hope. The old woman began to stamp her feet and swing her basket at Petya, and he barely managed to dart away. Catching his breath, he pressed on, but the city was now fully awake. Trams zipped by, people hurried to work, and the rumble of trucks filled the air as they rushed to deliver goods to stores, factories, and the railroad. Street cleaners were hard at work, clearing the snow and spreading sand on the sidewalks to prevent pedestrians from slipping, falling, or wasting time. Petya had witnessed all this countless times, but only now did he truly understand the urgency that drove people to fear being late or falling behind. As Petya scanned the streets for old friends, he found himself increasingly frustrated. Old folks rushed by, but they were unmistakably real elderly people, not the school children he was searching for. There was an old man carrying a briefcase, most likely a teacher. Another old man wielded a bucket and brush, a painter busy with his craft. A red fire truck sped past, its driver probably the city's fire chief, a man who had never wasted time in his life. Petya wandered through the bustling streets, feeling increasingly isolated and late. It seemed as though life thrived all around him while he remained stuck, forgotten, and useless. At precisely noon, he found a small park and sat down on a bench to rest, overwhelmed by despair. Suddenly he jumped up, drawn by the sight of an old woman sitting on a nearby bench, tears streaming down her face. Petya felt an urge to rush to her side, but hesitated. "I'll wait," he told himself, curious to see what she would do next. The old woman eventually ceased her crying and began to swing her legs. She pulled a newspaper from one pocket and a piece of resin bread from another. As she unfolded the newspaper, Petya's heart leaped with joy upon recognizing it. Pionierskaya Pravda, a newspaper for children which he would read every weekend. He watched as the old woman read and nibbled on her bread, picking out the raisins but leaving the best ones untouched. Without thinking, Petya dashed through the snow and bushes, calling out, "Granny, honestly, you're a schoolgirl." The old woman jumped with surprise and joy, taking Petya's hands in hers. True. I'm a third-grade student, Marusia Paspelova. And who are you?" Petya quickly introduced himself, and they clasped hands, excitedly setting off together to find their other friends. They searched for an hour, then 2, then 3. Finally, they entered the courtyard of a massive building and spotted another old woman leaping behind a woodshed. She was drawing hopscotch in chalk on the asphalt and bouncing a stone on one leg. "Granny, are you a schoolgirl?" Petya and Marusia called out. "Of course, a third-grade student, Nadia Sokolova," the old woman replied. "And who are you?" Petya and Marusia shared their names, and the three of them held hands, determined to search for the last companion. But he seemed to have vanished. They combed through courtyards, gardens, children's theaters, and cinemas, yet the boy was nowhere to be found. As darkness began to fall and the lights flickered on in the lower floors of the buildings, despair settled in. What were they to do? Had everything truly slipped away? Just then, Marusia let out a cry of delight. Look! Petya and Nadia turned to see a tram, number 9, whistling past. There was an old man, his hat tipped jauntily over one ear and his beard fluttering in the wind. The children took off after the tram, and fortune smiled upon them when the red light flickered at the intersection, halting the tram in its tracks. With determination, they seized the man by the hem of his coat, pulling him from the tram's grasp. "Are you a schoolboy?" they asked breathlessly. "Of course," he replied with a grin. "Second grader, Vasia Zaitsev. What do you want?" Petya and his friends quickly introduced themselves, and without wasting another moment, they all hopped aboard the tram, heading out of the city and toward the forest. By this time night fell, shrouding the forest in pitch black. The old friends stumbled and tripped over roots and fallen branches, unable to find the way. Exhausted and cold, the old friends struggled onward. Just then a breeze stirred, clearing the clouds, and the full moon cast a silvery glow across the landscape. Petya, seizing the opportunity, climbed a birch tree and spotted it. The little house with its white walls, just a short distance away, its windows glowing warmly amid the dark firs. "Quiet, not a word, follow me," he whispered to his comrade as he climbed down. The kids crept through the snow towards the little house, peering cautiously through the window. The clock inside read 5 minutes to midnight, and the sorceress lay sleeping on the hay, guarding the stolen time. "They're sleeping," Marusia breathed, her eyes wide. "Shh," Petya urged, and they quietly opened the door, inching toward the clock. Standing before it at 1 minute to midnight, Petya reached out his hand as the clock's minute hand edged towards 12. With a deep breath, he spun it back, once, twice, thrice. The sorcerers jolted awake with a cry, but found themselves frozen in place, unable to move. They grew and grew, transforming into elderly adults, gray hair sprouting at their temples and wrinkles etching their cheeks. "Lift me up," Petya shouted. "I'm shrinking. I can't reach the hands. 31, 32, 33. His friends hoisted him into the air. With each turn of the hands, the sorcerers became more decrepit, hunched over, their forms shrinking closer to the ground. On the 77th and final turn, the sorcerers screamed and vanished as if they had never existed in this world. The kids exchanged joyful glances, laughter bubbling forth. They had triumphed, reclaiming the childhood they thought lost to them. But as they celebrated, a vital lesson lingered in the air. A person who squanders time does not realize how quickly they grow old. This was a tale of lost time, published in 1966 by a Soviet author Evgeny Schwartz. It is originally, of course, not a thriller or horror story, and it's actually a children's book. But whenever I read it, even now, I can't help but experience, even just for a while, a bit of existential dread that my time is coming up, and there's nothing I can do about it. What did you feel? Sweet dreams, friends.